Hi-de-ho, this is Tony with the Jeep Talk Show, and just like you, I'm listening to the 10-Minute Off-Road Podcast with Nikki G.
38. Wheeling with the Fuzz. All right, sit back, relax, shut up, control yourself. The 10-Minute Off-Road Podcast is about to begin. Hello, and welcome to the 10-Minute Off-Road Podcast. I'm your host, Nikki G. I'm here to inform, entertain, and delight, and tell you everything you ever want to know about off-roading for the next 10 minutes or so. Why 10 minutes? Because that's about how long until the authorities arrive. I think I've used that one before. All right, welcome to the show. I want to dive right into it tonight and talk about wheeling with disabilities. I had a very big eye-opener this week. If I've mentioned it before, I have a brother who was born deaf and then recently lost his vision. He was an avid off-roader and a top-notch mechanic. He was my hero and still is my hero, and we still work together on a lot of different projects. But he hasn't been off-roading or wheeling in about 5 years, and it's killing him. He asks me all the time about where I go and trips I take, and I try to describe and talk to him, tell him about them. And then one of his friends mentioned to me, hey, next time you go wheeling, take him with you. I bet he would enjoy it. And I really didn't think he would enjoy it, but it just so happened he was staying with me for a couple of weeks. So I told him I was going off-roading. And before I could even finish, he says, can I come? Absolutely, you can come. I'd love to have you. So I packed up the Jeep, loaded him in it, and we headed off out to Uwharrie for a day of wheeling. And I discovered that wheeling with somebody with disabilities is, I won't say a chore, but I wasn't prepared for it. It's a little bit different. And we still... Well, I say I had a good time. And he said he had a good time too, but I don't think he enjoyed it as much as I did. And I'll go into detail and explain what happened and what I've learned from it. All right, so the first thing I did is I jumped on the internet to see any information I could find about wheeling with people with disabilities, for any tips and advice or anything, and discovered there is very little information that I can find. Of course, I'm not internet savvy, and my man chopping, beating on a keyboard didn't produce any results. I did find that there's an organization called Four Wheeling to Heal, and it's mostly for vets, where they organize disabled vets to ride along with other wheelers so they can get out and enjoy it. But other than that, I really haven't found too much information. So I loaded my brother up in the Jeep. We head out for the Uwharrie, and we had a good time. And it started out great. Then about an hour or two into it, I noticed he was not as, the word I'm looking for is energetic. He was just kind of very lethargic and sitting there. I kept asking him if he was okay, and he kept giving me the thumbs up. Then we got to a stopping point where we stopped, and he asked for something. He asked for his sandwich. So I gave him his sandwich, and he ate it. And I asked him, "Are you okay?" And he gave me the wishy-washy hand gesture. And I said, "What's wrong?" He said he was feeling kind of dizzy. So I said, "Okay. Do you want to take a break? Do you want to keep going? Do you want to go home? What do you want to do?" And he just said, "I'm done." And I said, "Okay." And at that point, I made a decision to pack it in and go home. I drove 2 hours to get out there. I usually stay until it gets dark and I'm forced to leave. So I just love just driving around and just sitting in the woods. But he had enough, and so we decided to air up, pack it in, and we drove home. And driving home, he had the AC cranked. I could tell he really wasn't feeling good. And I guess being jostled around, it's sort of like I imagine it's sort of like riding a roller coaster with your eyes closed. He just got jostled around a little bit, and it said it made him dizzy. He wasn't feeling too good. It wasn't as enjoyable as he thought it would be for him. So we packed it in and went home. But I've learned so much from this first trip. I think we can do it again, and I can make it even more enjoyable for him. And so I made a list of things that I've learned from this. And first thing I learned is information. Make sure you give the person you want to wheel with, person with disabilities, as much information as you can. Where you're going, how rough the trails are, who's going to be there, what's the weather going to be like. Is it going to be hot, cold, wet, rainy? Make sure they know what they're getting into. And elevation, too. That's one thing my brother asked me was how high we are. And, of course, we were in Uwari, so we were I think we were 400 or 500 feet above sea level. It really wasn't high up in the mountains. So I guess he was worried about thinning air and lack of oxygen. Now he wheels out west where you can quickly go up a couple of thousand feet. And also wildlife. He asked me what kind of bears were around. And of course we're in Uwari. I don't think there's any bears in Uwari. But there are high population of rattlesnakes there. So that's good for him to know. Make sure they have as much information about the area as you could possibly give them, and anything else on the trip. Where you're going to stop for snacks, where you're going to have lunch, where you're going to eat on the way home, how long of a drive it is, all that stuff. What's along the way that you can stop. Another thing is plan for the unexpected. Bring a pillow to help them keep comfortable. Bring a blanket in case they're cold. I don't know what you do if they're hot. Let them strip down into a bathing suit maybe, or even plan for a swimming break if you can. And bathroom breaks. That's something I didn't plan for. My brother, who can't see, had to use the restroom. I didn't want to lead him out into the woods to do his business. And he doesn't want me to lead him out into the woods to do his business. And you really can't walk with a cane because, when you see people in the movies walking down the street with a cane, totally blind, I got to tell you that's total bullcrap. But anyhow, he had to use the restroom, and I didn't even know it. But he opens up the door, pops out of the Jeep, pulls it out, and starts going. Because I guess if you're blind, you can't tell if anybody else is watching you or nothing. And we had 2 women in our group and 2 kids. And luckily, they were nowhere near at the time, but it could have easily been an offended situation. So plan for that. Bring blankets or a shelter or some way for them to use the bathroom in privacy and in dignity. And that's even for anybody. One thing I learned is start small. We had a small group. I think it would have been even a little bit more comfortable for them if it was just one other person. It totally would have been really, really uncomfortable for him if there was a lot of people there. But you should never wheel alone, so you should at least have one rig with you. But make sure your group doesn't get too big. And the downside of it being too small is if something happens, and you're focusing all your energy, just say you're stuck, and there's only 2 of you, so you're focusing on trying to get unstuck. You really don't have any spare attention to give to your disabled passenger. And, they need to be kept in the loop, and they require a little bit more attention than just, somebody without disabilities. So make sure you're able to tend to them, even though you're tending to yourself, if that makes sense. Closely monitor the situation. I kept looking over at my brother, and I noticed he was happy, gung-ho. He was even cussing at me whenever I hit a rock. I hit a rock unexpectedly when we came to a stop, and he started cussing, and we were having a good time. And slowly he just stopped interacting as much and looked over, and he was just holding on for dear life, going for a ride. And You could tell that the whole attitude of the ride changed. So monitor it closely. Pay attention to what it's not necessarily to what they're saying, but to what they're doing. Because I said my brother would never admit defeat. I guess is the wrong word for it, because it's, if you can't go wheeling, you can't go wheeling. He would never admit a weakness. So he's just kind of like, kept giving me the thumbs up, and I took it at that. And looking back now, I should have thrown in a towel about half hour, 45 minutes sooner. That leads me to knowing when to throw in a towel. Pay attention to the situation. There's, if you're on a trail and you can't complete it, there's no shame in turning back. Same thing when you're wheeling with somebody with disabilities. There's, if they can't hack it, don't force it on them. There's no shame in turning back, and going to Dairy Queen and having an ice cream cone is probably just as enjoyable, but only if the ice cream cone has sprinkles. And the last thing I want to say is wheeling with people with disabilities is show empathy and compassion. Me and my brother, we, even to this day, we still argue and fight quite a bit. And I bet there every day, at least once a day, we break out into a disagreement about something. And some of the stuff he wants and says is really ridiculous and out of the way. But yeah, we argue all the time. We fight all the time. But even through all that, I show him empathy because I feel so bad for him that he's lost so much in his life. He still goes on and he still enjoys life, and he still attempts to do everything he can do before he lost his sight. He's helped me work on my truck a couple of times. Every time I'm doing something around the house, he's always poking his head in the way and trying to help. And even off-roading, he's, he wants to be there. He wants to continue on his life, but he's limited. And so you have to keep that in mind, show compassion for him. All right. And all in all, I got to say, I love wheeling with my brother. We're going to have to go back out and do it again. I learned so much from this trip. I think I can make it enjoyable for him. But that's about all that on that subject. Let's wrap it up. You can catch the 10-Minute Off-Road Podcast on all the social media outlets, such as Facebook, YouTube, the Twitter, and the Gram, but never on TikTok. If you see me on TikTok, or you see this podcast on TikTok, then it's been hacked or it's an imposter. I would tell you can listen to the 10-Minute Off-Road Podcast on Google Play, Apple Podcast, Anchor, Podbean, and a couple of other things, even Spotify. But why waste my breath telling you that? Because you're already listening to it. You can contact the 10-Minute Off-Road Podcast at 10minuteoffroad@gmail.com. Or you can just leave a comment to one of the many YouTube videos. We don't have a fancy-dancy YouTube URL yet because we're still small potatoes. But I also post it on my YouTube channel, Nick G. So that's youtube.com/Nick G. Or the easiest way to find my channel, because when you put in Nick G in the YouTube search, it comes up with a bunch of weird stuff. The easiest way to find my podcast, I tell you, is put in Trail Review Brown Mountain. That seems to be a very popular video of mine, and it pulls my channel up. All right, so that's about all the time I have this week. Until next time, this is Nicky G saying, wheel what you got and be happy.